Welcome to Shankar's Daily News Analysis. Today's topic of discussion is, in this first article, we'll discuss about the provisions of Disaster Management Act and what are the proposed provisions in the recent amendment which is passed by the Lok Sabha. And in the second article, we'll discuss about the tiger species detailedly from the prelims perspective. And in this third article, we'll discuss about the key provisions in the Places of Worship Act 1991 and the recent hearing by the Supreme Court and the Ayodhya. We will also discuss the Ayodhya verdict as well. And in this last article, which is taken from Indian Express newspaper, here we will discuss about the corporate social responsibility and the various impact created by this corporate social responsibilities. So we will also discuss what are the government initiatives taken to encourage this corporate social responsibility. So without further delay, let's get into today's discussion. So if you see the past week newspaper, this particular act, that is the Places of Worship Act 1991, has been repeated in the newspaper article again and again. And currently, the Supreme Court is hearing whether the district court can have the power to hear the civil suits related to the Places of Worship Act and whether the hearing by the district court can undermine this act or not. So what we will focus on this discussion is the objectives and the provisions of this particular act detailedly from the prelims perspective. So this act, so the essence of this act is that they wanted to maintain the religious character of any site as on August 15, 1947. So this is the main essence of this act. So to maintain the religious character, this is the key word, and the date is August 15, 1947. So this act wanted to maintain the religious character of India and to ensure the social harmony, and they have the following objective. The first objective is to ensure the religious harmony. So how they do? And to ensure the religious harmony, they prevent disputes by maintaining the status quo. That is nothing but to maintain the existing condition, and they have mentioned the date, that is the August 15, 1947. They also addresses the historical wrongs and they focus on moving beyond the historical grievances related to any religious site. Thirdly, they wanted to promote the unity among various religious people. So they prevent the misuse of these religious issue for the purpose of political or any social division. So thereby they wanted to promote the unity as well. And they also provide a legal certainty and finality regarding the ownership and the character of any religious site. So this is the important objective. They provide a finality regarding the ownership and character of any religious site. So we know secularism is enshrined as a major and important principle in our preamble of the Constitution. So they wanted to safeguard this secular character of India, and this act is having one of the main objective to ensure the and enforce the India's constitutional commitment to the secularism. These are the main objectives this particular act is having. Now we will see what are the provisions of this act. So they prohibit the conversion of religious character of the land under this section 3 of the Places of Worship Act. So it prohibits the conversion of any place of worship to another denomination. This is the important provisions you have to remember. It also wanted to maintain the religious character as on August 15. So on August 15, what was the religious character of any particular site has to be maintained. This is the main and important essence of this particular act, and any legal proceeding to alter this status is not allowed under the section 4 of the Places of Worship Act. These are the two key provisions. One is to maintain the religious character, another they do not allow the conversion of one place of worship into another. These are the key provisions, and important thing we have to remember with respect to this particular act. So if this act is violated, one can be imprisoned for about 3 years and even fines are imposed. So three things are excluded under this act. First is any ancient monuments that comes under the Ancient Monument and Archaeological Sites and Remains Act. So these acts, that is these ancient monuments are excluded under this act. Secondly, the Ram Janmabhoomi and Babri Masjid dispute, this case is specially excluded under this particular act. And thirdly, any disputes which were resolved or it is pending in the courts before the enactment of this act. So the Places of Worship Act 1991, before the enactment, any case that is the dispute is resolved or it is pending is excluded under this particular act. So you have to remember the main exemptions. This is also important. Now we will see an important landmark case with respect to this act, which is the Ayodhya verdict. So in this case, they uphold the constitutionality validity of this particular act. They also said that this act is a part of basic structure of the constitution, as it ensures there is a equality and they promote the secular character of the India and to ensure the communal harmony. So this is a basic structure of the constitution, and in this case they ensure the constitutional validity of this particular act. So these are the things that we have to learn from this particular article and this Places of Worship Act. So let's see a prelims practice question. Which of the following, the Places of Worship Act 1991 does not apply to which of the following? Historical monuments under the Ancient Monuments and Archaeological Sites Act. So this is also not applicable. So we have seen this. Any disputes already resolved before the enactment of this act. So this is also not part. We have discussed this. Newly constructed religious places after 1991 also do not comes under this act. So the correct option is option C, all of the above. With this, we will conclude the discussion on this article, and now let's move on to next one. So this is the next article that we are going to discuss today, and the Lok Sabha has passed the bill to amend the Disaster Management Act of 2005. So this is the legal framework available in India to deal with the disaster management. So to ensure a better coordination between the central government and state government, also to enhance and to face the implementation challenges, we are going to amend the Disaster Management Act, and this has been passed in the Lok Sabha. So in this discussion, we will focus on the provisions of the Disaster Management Act and what are the proposed provisions in the amendment. These are the two main things that we will focus in this discussion. So the Disaster Management Act of 2005 has a main objective to provide for a effective disaster prevention, to avoid them, to mitigate, that is to adapt them, and to create a preparedness, response, recovery, reconstruction. So we have 3R, that is response, recovery and reconstruction. So these are the main objective of this Disaster Management Act, and the first provision is to provide a institutional framework. So in the central level, we have the Disaster Management, National Disaster Management Authority, which is headed by the Prime Minister. So this Disaster Management Authority at the national level is responsible to formulate any policy, guidelines, plans for the disaster management in India at the national level. And at the state level, similar to the National Disaster Management Authority, we have the State Disaster Management Authority, which is headed by the Chief Minister. So here it is headed by the Prime Minister. It is an important point that you have to note. And at the district level, we have the Disaster Management Authority at the district level, which is headed by the district collector or the magistrate. And we also have a committee called as the National Executive Committee, which will assist and help the National Disaster Management Authority to conduct its function. This is the institutional framework of the Disaster Management Act. This is the first provision that we have discussed. Also, it has another provisions as well. So they are responsible to prepare the central, state and district level disaster management plan, and it also has certain powers during a disaster. For example, the central government have a power to issue binding, so the it is binding in nature, and they will issue binding directions to the state government. Similarly, the authorities under this particular act has a power to allocate requisition resources, to impose any restrictions and to regulate the communication. These are the main powers which are mentioned in this act. They also issue punishment in case of non-compliance. So the penalties are imposed in case of obstruction, false claims and any misappropriation of the disaster relief resources. So we also have special funds under this act. So at the national level we have the National Disaster Response Fund, and the state level we have the State Disaster Response Fund. So there is also a involvement of local bodies, and they are responsible for the disaster preparedness and management in case of community level. So these are the main provisions. First we have the institutional framework, we also have the power, the funds, penalties and the power of local bodies. Now we will see what are the proposed provisions that are included in the amendment of this Disaster Management Act, and what is passed by the Lok Sabha. So firstly, during the COVID pandemic, this Disaster Management Act was invoked, and they regulated this lockdown and the crowd management and the health infrastructure management. So many new provisions has been proposed to integrate the health related disaster also because of the impact of COVID. This is the first provision, that is the proposed provision. Secondly, they have also insisted to incorporate provisions to ensure the climate resilience. So many climate change adaptation and mitigation measures has been ensured in the new proposed amendment. Thirdly, they have also increased the fund mechanism to the disaster which are caused by the climate change, and they have also included stricter enforcement of building codes and urban planning. So this will help us to mitigate the urban flooding which is frequent in recent days, and to manage the earthquake and forest fires. So they have strengthened the, so they are planning to strengthen the urban disaster management. Fourthly, they also wanted to improve the coordination between the central government and state governments. So there is a mentioning of provisions that will improve the clarity of the roles of the national and state level disaster management authorities. So this will help us to prevent the overlap between their function. It will also help us to reduce the delay. This is the main function. And lastly, they also are adapting to the technological innovations that are taking place in recent era. So they are incorporating provisions that will use the artificial intelligence, the geographic information system and the satellite data for the purpose of early warning and the real time responses. So these are the proposed provisions in the amendment of the Disaster Management Act that is passed by the Lok Sabha. So here one thing you have to remember is they have included many provisions for the climate change related and disease related disasters. They have also gave importance for the urban disaster management, and fourthly they have specified the roles even more accurately, and they have incorporated the use of technology in disaster management. So these are the key points that we can remember with respect to the proposed provisions. So with this knowledge, let's see a prelims practice question. Under the Disaster Management Act of 2005, which of the following is not a function of Disaster Management Authority? So A, to formulate the disaster management policy, this is correct. To coordinate the activities of the armed force, so this is not the function of Disaster Management Act, so this provision is not mentioned. They also approve national plan for the disaster management. They direct the state governments on the disaster response. So the correct option would be B, coordinating the activities of armed forces, and this is not a function of Disaster Management Authority. So with this, let's conclude the discussion on this article, and now let's move on to next one. A female tiger from Odisha, Simlipal, has strayed to the state of Jharkhand. So this is prompting the efforts of interstate to conserve these tigers. This also highlights there is a habitat fragmentation which is endangering the living of tigers. So the news in itself is not much important, but we will take this as an opportunity to learn about the national animal of India, which is Panthera tigris tigris. So we will have the conservation status. We will also look about the conservation measures taken by the government to protect this national animal. So starting with this Bengal tiger, as we know, this is the national animal of India and it is the apex predator, and they have an important role to maintain the ecological balance in an ecosystem. So under IUCN Red List, which is the International Union for Conservation of Nature, which was established in 1948, so they are known for maintaining a IUCN Red List. Under that list, the Bengal tiger comes under the endangered species, and they have a population of almost 3,116 as of 2022 tiger census. So this is the population of India, population of tiger in India, and they are considered as endangered species. So these are the main threats as highlighted in the news article. They are prone to habitat loss and fragmentation. That is why they are tend to move from one state to another. There is a extended poaching because of the health medicine benefits and the decorative purposes. There is an increased conflict between human and wildlife because of the habitat loss and fragmentation. These are the major threats the Bengal tigers are facing. And talking about the geographical distribution, it is found in India, Bangladesh, Nepal, Bhutan and Myanmar. And with respect to India, it is found in the terrarium. It is found in the Uttarakhand as well as Uttar Pradesh. It is also found in the central India, that is in the Madhya Pradesh and in Maharashtra. It is also found in the Sundarbans of West Bengal. So the Bangladesh and the Indian governments are taking joint initiatives to protect the Bengal tigers in this region. It is also found in the Western Ghats, starting from Karnataka, Kerala and Tamil Nadu. It is also found here, and in the northeastern state, it is also found in Assam and Arunachal Pradesh. This is the distribution of the tiger in the Indian level, and it is also found in the neighboring countries as well. So we have exclusive programs designed for the protection of and conservation of tiger. So one such initiative is the Project Tiger, which was launched in the year 1973. So it focuses to reduce the human pressure on tiger habitat. So they have developed many tiger reserves for the protection of tiger and to reduce the human pressure on tiger habitats. So they have provided a financial support and a scientific research management for this purpose. So this Project Tiger has a main goal to ensure the long-term survival of tiger and to preserve the habitat of them. So because of that Project Tiger, we have many tiger reserves. So we have almost 53 tiger reserves as of 2023. So recently a tiger reserve was launched by Indian government. If you know that, you can comment in the comment section. This covers an almost more than 75,000 square kilometer. So now I will list few key tiger reserves, and one is the Corbett Tiger Reserve, which is located in Uttarakhand. We have Ranthambore Tiger Reserve, which is located in Rajasthan. Similarly, we have Kanha Tiger Reserve, which is located in Madhya Pradesh. As mentioned in this news article, we have Simlipal, which is located in Odisha. Similarly, if you know where this Bandhavgarh Tiger Reserve is located, you can comment that. And the goal of this tiger reserve is to maintain a space for the breeding and the conservation of the tiger habitat. So the next mechanism that we have in India to preserve and protect this tiger population is the National Tiger Conservation Authority. So if you are reading any authority, you have to learn under which act it was established. So this authority was established in the year 2005 under a Wildlife Protection Act of 1972. So this is the important thing that you have to remember from the prelims perspective. That's a possible question. And they focus on monitoring and evaluate the management of this tiger reserve. They also address issues such as poaching, degradation of habitat, and the conflict between the animal and human. So this two initiative mainly focuses to conserve the tiger and its habitat. So under this, the tiger reserves are established and it is monitored by the Tiger Conservation Authority. So now other initiatives are also conducted. So they have expanded the protected areas such as tiger reserves and wildlife sanctuaries to protect these tigers. They also create buffer zones to prevent the human animal conflict. They create wildlife corridors to prevent the habitat fragmentation, and they also restore the degraded habitat to improve the availability of prey for this survival of tigers. So these are the initiatives taken by the government to protect and conserve this tiger. Now we will see what are the global level partnerships that India have with other countries to protect this species. So we have CITES, which is the Convention on International Trade of Endangered Species. We know tiger is an endangered species. So this CITES bans the illegal trafficking and trade of the tiger body parts and its derivatives. This is the first partnership we have. We also have joint initiative with the neighboring countries. For example, in case of tigers which are present in the Sundarbans, so the Indian government and the Bangladesh government are taking joint initiatives to protect and manage the tiger species located there. We also collaborate with other neighboring countries such as Nepal, Bhutan, Myanmar to protect the shared habitats where the tigers are living. So in this article they have mentioned about the technical innovations which can be used to protect and conserve the tiger. So one such initiative is the use of radio collars and the satellite tracking. So this can be used to track the movement of the tigers, to monitor their behavior and to mitigate the conflict between human and animal. So we can also use genetic studies to study the population health and to examine the diversity. We can also use the forensic analysis to identify any poached tigers. Thirdly, many technical innovations such as artificial intelligence and smart technology can be used to track the motion of tigers and help in the detection of the threat automatically. So in this discussion, we had a detailed perspective of the tiger from the environment subject aspect. So with this, let's see a prelims practice question. Bengal tigers are endangered on the IUCN Red List. Yes, this is true. And habitat loss and poaching are the significant threat to survival of tigers. This is also a correct statement. India is home to over 90% of world's Bengal tiger. That's not true. It is also found in the neighboring countries such as Nepal, Bhutan, Myanmar and Bangladesh. So the correct option is A, 1 and 2 only. So with this, we'll conclude the discussion on this article, and now let's move on to the next one. So take a look at this. They have detailedly talked about the corporate social responsibility, which comes under the Companies Act. So they have highlighted the impact of this corporate social responsibility as they are acting as a tool for the national level development, and it has created a serious and an impact on be it health, education, the environmental sustainability. They have created a wide range of impact. So we will learn what is this corporate social responsibilities detailedly from the prelims perspective. So let's start from the definition. So these are practices which are followed by the corporate sectors to address the social, environmental and economic issues in the society. Rather only focusing on the profit, they also focus on the benefit of the society in the multi sector, that is in the social, environmental and economic issues. This is called as the corporate social responsibilities, and in India it is the first country. So here you can see India is the first country to mandate the corporate social spending under the clause 135 of the Companies Act. So this is an important feature of India. That's why we are discussing it detailedly. So they are important because they ensure the ethical governance, community level development, and they also follow sustainable practices to address the following issues. So I said it is governed under the section 135 of the Companies Act 2013. Now let's see the important provisions under this act. So it is applicable to the companies which has met certain criteria, and this criteria is defined here. Any company which has met any of the following criteria has to follow this corporate social responsibility. The first criteria is that if they have a net worth of 500 crores or above, they are eligible to follow the CSR, and any company which are having a turnover of more than 1000 crores also consider it, and they have a net profit of 5 crores or more. If they meet any of the following criteria, the CSR is applicable to the following companies, and these eligible companies has to follow a CSR committee, and this committee will recommend the activities for those companies. This is the main provision under the act. We also have other provisions which is regarding the spending. So the eligible companies has to spend at least 2% of the average net profits in the past 3 years. This is the spending level which is mentioned in this Companies Act. So the unspent amount of this particular quantity has to be transferred to a specified fund or any project accounts within a limited time. This is the another feature, and the companies has to disclose the policies of CSR of their particular company, the initiatives, and what they have spent has to be submitted in an annual report by the companies. So a CSR policy amendment was done in the year 2021, and in this amendment of the rules, certain provisions were included under this amendment of the CSR policies rules. So a framework has been designed for the implementation and to access the impact of the CSR and to ensure the transparency. They have also imposed penalties in case of non-compliance. So these are the main provisions with respect to the CSR under the section 135 of the Companies Act 2013. So they have talked about the who are eligible and why there has to be a committee, CSR committee has to form, and the average spending that has to be done, and if the spending is not done, it has to be transferred to a specific fund, and they have to disclose all the initiatives and spending they have done, and they have also ensured penalty for the non-compliance under the new amendment of the CSR rules. These are the key points of this particular act. Now we will see what is the focus area. If you see, many corporate are investing in providing tuition to the people who are not able to go for a private tuition. So many educational activities are also conducted by them, and many corporate sectors are initiating many tree planting initiatives. This will promote the environment sustainability and promote the ecosystem. They are also providing many social welfare programs and health campaigns. So medical camps are also conducted by this corporate. So they provide disaster relief fund in case of any health disasters or in case of any natural disasters. So all these are the focus areas of the corporate social responsibilities. So this, as I mentioned, it is acting as a national tool for the development, and it is aligning with the corporate goals. So the main, as generally said, the corporate focus on the profit. So it is also creating a environmental economic benefit to the marginalized people also with the help of CSR. So the major criticism on corporate is that there are many profit motive, but this is changed with the help of CSR. It is also helping us in the national level development. So many public sector undertakings are acting as a lead example. For example, in this article they have mentioned about the Indian Oil Initiative. So they have taken various initiatives in the field of health, education, and they have conducted the national level development with the help of the CSR, and this is creating a sense of satisfaction among the employees who are working towards these sense CSR. They are also creating a brand image by portraying themselves, by creating a good name for themselves by conducting many CSR. So the, as I already said, the focus area of CSR also, they also focus on clean energy, environmental conservation and the efficiency in the resource management. So other few important facts that are mentioned in this article is that our India has contributed almost 1 lakh crore since the year 2014 in the CSR spending, and this has been contributed mainly by the IT, manufacturing sector and the energy sector. So the Ministry of Corporate Affairs will monitor the complaints and spending of the CSR eligible companies. So this is a very important point. So it comes under the Ministry of Corporate Affairs. So this is an important point you have to remember. So they will also access the impact. Another thing is that they also access the impact assessment which are required for projects which are more than 1 crore. So these are the important facts that were highlighted in that article. Now we will see what are the government initiatives taken to encourage the CSR. So many awards are given to recognize their initiatives. So we have national level CSR award. So many public private partnership was also conducted to create a larger impact, and we have also have a specified portal called as the Ministry of Corporate Affairs 21 portal. So they have simplified the filing, CSR annual report filing. So this is also creating a simplified procedure for the management on supervising of the CSR by the government. So in this article discussion we saw what is CSR, what is the focus area, we saw the provisions of the Companies Act and what are the initiatives taken by government to encourage the CSR, be it in awards, the partnership and the specified portal for easy report filing. Now we will see a prelims practice question to test our knowledge. Which ministry is responsible for monitoring and enforcing the CSR complaints? So it's very easy. The answer is Ministry of Corporate Affairs. The correct option is A, Ministry of Corporate Affairs. We have come to end of today's video. If you found the video informative, do hit like, give your feedbacks as comment and do not forget to subscribe. Thank you. Have a nice day.